sickness and the heartache that it causes to many owners. Over the next few years, the fund, working with the Morden Foundation, will embark on an innovative research project bringing scientists, vets and horse owners together and hopefully break new ground into the mysteries of the disease. Our speakers tonight will explain further how you can help us on this journey. Our first speaker is Professor Lee Innes, the present Director of Communication at Morden Research Institute, and she has been involved in research to prevent and control livestock disease for over 30 years, with vast experience bringing scientists, vets and horse owners together. Sorry, my mistake, I've boobed there. And she's been involved in research to prevent and control livestock disease for over 30 years, with vast experience in leading multidisciplinary teams, which is what we hope to do with this project. Lee has been involved from the outset in developing the project for equine grass sickness. Our second speaker is our new research fellow, Dr. Kathy Geyer, who will lead this joint project based at Morden. Kathy has a PhD in parasitology and genetics, with many high-impact scientific publications to her name. Some of you may know Kathy through her previous work with the Horse Trust and Morden. Speaker number 3 is veterinary surgeon Donald McLean. Donald qualified from Glasgow in 1979 and has worked full-time in mixed practice, first in East Sussex, then in North Yorkshire, and for over 30 years in Murrayshire, Northern Scotland. Donald is our lead veterinary ambassador for this project. Our fourth speaker is Professor Elspeth Milne. Elspeth, a 1979 Edinburgh graduate, needs no introduction as a veterinarian and eminent pathologist, and is a fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists and a European diplomat of veterinary pathology. So we're very lucky to have these people speaking with us this evening. So I'll now hand you over, Lee, to commence with our project overview.
Thanks very much, Anne. Oh, sorry, everyone. I'm going to try and share our presentation with you. If I can get my technology to work. Now, can everyone see that? Okay. Is that coming up on the screen?
No.
No. Okay, hold on a minute. Let's see. What I'll do, I'll tell you what, I won't mess about with the technology. I've obviously got the presentations. What I really wanted to do was start off by saying, oh, Hazel's, sorry, thank you, Hazel. My colleague Hazel's hopefully going to get this open for us. Well, while she's trying to do that, I'd first of all just like to thank you all very much for coming along to the webinar this evening. We're really delighted to have you here to hear a bit more about the project that we've been developing between Morden and the Equine Grass Sickness Fund. Hazel, I'm not sure if that is going on. We could just take it off and I could just speak if you like, if that's not working. I'll carry on anyway. Sorry about this. We may get this up and working. So my background is that as Anne's saying, I've studied sort of interdisciplinary research for quite a number of years now. Mainly, I'm an immunologist, so I've been working on infectious disease research. And the reason I was interested in the Equine Grass Sickness Project was because it seemed a really good opportunity to apply some interdisciplinary thinking and bringing together lots of people that are involved in different aspects of research. So we thought there was a real opportunity here to bring together the vets and horse owners and scientists from many different disciplines to work together to try and find a cause for equine grass sickness. As you probably know, this is a disease that we've known about for about 100 years now. And there's been a lot of really good research done in this area, but we just have had some, we haven't yet got the causal agent. And we thought it was, we were quite keen to just take a completely fresh look at this and bring in people, as I say, from different scientific disciplines and in the veterinary profession to see if by working together we can make a difference to this project. So we put some funding together from the Morden Foundation. It was our centenary last year, and we had some funding we put in with the Equine Grass Sickness Fund to be able to fund a new fellow. And you're going to hear a bit more from Kathy Geyer after me, who'll tell you a bit more about her project. But one of the things we really felt was terribly important in this disease is that because it's an acute disease, often when the vets like yourselves get called out, the horses are, there's not much we can do for them, and the horses will get put down. And we did feel that we were missing quite a lot of samples that might be very valuable for research. So one of the reasons we wanted to pull you all together was also to try and explain to you what we're trying to do with this project, which was to develop a new biobank where we could try and lodge some of these samples. And these samples would be absolutely invaluable for the research effort. And we know this is going to be quite tricky, and therefore the speakers we've got tonight are really going to talk you through what might be required, and we really hope that we might get some of you on board to help us with this project. So what I'm going to do now, you're going to hear from the important people next, the people, Kathy's going to tell you a bit more about her project and how you can get involved. And then we're going to pass on, as Anne's saying, to Donald McLean, who has a huge amount of experience in equine grass sickness, to tell you about his experience and also talk about how we might collect the samples. And then we're delighted we've got Elspeth Milne, who's going to give you a lot more detail on what samples might be really helpful for this project. So my apologies about the technology. I'm just not having a good day for technology. But what I'll do now is I'll pass on to Kathy, who's going to tell you a bit more about the project. Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Lee, for the introduction. And I will try to share my presentation now again, so hopefully it works. So yes, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. And yeah, we do really appreciate your support with our biobank project. Can everyone see this? Lee, is that working?
Yes, Kathy, I can see that.
Yeah, okay.
Anne's nodding, she can see it too. Thank you.
Great, thank you, cheers. So yes, thanks everyone for joining us and for your support our biobank project. And Lee already explained to you the importance of these equine grass sickness case samples, as well as the biobank in general for the future of equine grass sickness research, as well as, yeah, and we really do hope that this will be actually a turning point in the field of equine grass sickness research. So as a researcher, equine grass sickness is a disease which is very challenging to work with because of the lack of samples, as you can imagine. And that's why we do really want to make use of these samples that are available to us, and that these animals, that they have not died in vain, but with your help, that, you know, as part of the biobank, that they could provide the basis for a novel approach to equine grass sickness research. And first up, I'd just like to talk a little bit about what we've got planned for the actual fellowship project. So as Lee said, there have been over 100 years of research into equine grass sickness. And so far, there has not been a conclusive evidence really for a causative agent or a specific cause of the disease. However, there have been various different theories. First, we'd like to do a very thorough review of the existing literature that's available out there, identify any gaps and limitations for those studies so far, and also try to analyze potentially some of the data that's already available to us. We then hopefully come up with the main research strands on which we can concentrate for future research. We aim to, in order, as Lee said, we'd like to hit this multifactorial disease with an interdisciplinary research approach. So we aim a crucible event, and we'll be inviting experts from various different fields, geneticists, botanists, soil scientists, microbiologists, and so on, to really try and get to the bottom of the disease and to work on future grant applications. Morden already has experience from with bovine and ovine organoid cultures. So these are 3D gut cultures, and we are also planning on developing those for equines. And these models will then actually allow us to look at an in vitro system to test potential causative agents, and also to look at immune responses and gut responses. Additionally, we'll also have got longitudinal study sites. So these are premises that have a history of equine grass sickness, so numerous cases in the past. And we will try and get a project license for those sites. And then we'll be able to actually look at immune responses in the equines across the whole year, as well as also take environmental samples of soil, pastures of herbage and water sources and so on. And from the fields that had cases in the past, as well as fields that have been unaffected, to try and get to the bottom of risk factors and just find out what's going on really. So I do hope that you understand now the sort of benefit of the biobank, and that's obviously the major aim of the project, to set up the biobank with samples of cases. So now I'd just like to talk about setting up a biobank with a researcher point of view. So Donald, as Lee said, he's available tonight, and he will be talking more about the practical aspects of that, because we researchers always have great ideas, but sometimes they're perhaps feasible or it's plausible in practice. So we've got Donald for that. And also generally, I'd just quite like to say that the biobank project is a work in progress, and we see it as a collaboration, as Lee said, between vets, researchers and horse owners. And as such, we'd like to have feedback from you guys, any comments, suggestions. Also, we'd like to make things as easy as possible for you, so any feedback is welcome. And we also will be feeding back to you what we've come up to and any progress we've made. And so we intend to run the project for a total of most likely 3 years, potentially longer if we get more funding. And it's just started really in the beginning of February. And it's been quite a challenge to get everything up and running, especially with filling in ethical consent forms and so on. But we now have got ethical approval for our biobank. And that's why we really like to get going with it, especially with the season upon us as well. And also, that's obviously, it's getting more and more stressful as well with lambing and calving, and that's why we plan to do the webinars now. Really. So first up, we'd like to set up a national equine grass sickness vet network, mainly in the regions which have the majority of the cases. So that would be the east coast of the country, or east counties of the country. However, obviously cases of equine grass sickness occur across the country, so any support across the country is very welcome. And as the project goes on, and by working closely with vets and horse owners, we hope to raise the awareness of the disease. And we got information available for horse owners. We obviously will be holding a webinar for horse owners as well. But we've got information available, so if you just contact us, we can provide you with more information. And it'd be great if you can send it out in newsletters or put it up on social media, because we really want to raise the awareness of the disease itself, as well as of our biobank project. So as you said, trying to set up this biobank, so it will incorporate equine samples, so that would be the pre-postmortem and the postmortem samples. Pre-mortem, post-mortem samples. So for these ones, we'll obviously need owners' consent, and I'll be talking about them in a bit. But we'll also have environmental samples. So once we can hopefully get out and about, we hope to do some site visits and to actually look at the fields and see if there are potential risk factors, or also take soil samples, herbage samples, and so on, as well as also non-invasive samples of the co-grazers. And then we've got an owner's questionnaire as well. So this is a little bit more elaborate than just a case report. So it's got more information about the horses themselves, as well as also the management and its immediate surroundings. And this will hopefully help us to just understand more about risk factors. So we really encourage horse owners to actually take those questionnaires, even if they can't provide any samples. And then coming on to the horse samples now. So as I said, for those who will need consent from the owner, and Donald McLean will be talking about this later on. And for the invasive samples, so the blood and the rectal fecal sample, we can only really have samples that would be taken for diagnostic purposes anyway. Residual samples of that. And also for the bloods, it would be great to actually, with the owner's consent, to have the data from any analysis, biochemistry, whatever, what would be done in practice. And it would also be great to have a saliva sample, so non-invasive sample, taken by the vet or by the owners, but we've got swabs available in our sample kits. So it's just like with the Equisal, the tapeworm test. And then also something which might be a bit more tricky is the urine sample. But yeah, hopefully the owner can get an opportunistic sample of that. And that is the pre-mortem samples. So moving on to the post-mortem samples. As Lee said, we do completely understand that this is obviously quite a difficult subject, but to us, these samples are complete gold dust, you know, and we do need them for diagnosis. So Elspeth and Milne will talk more about this. But yeah, these samples really, for us, you know, would be really great. And we sort of said that a gold standard level of sample collection would be to have the pre-mortem samples and potential environmental samples, owner's question, as well as terminal ileum samples, autonomic ganglia sample as well. So the autonomic ganglia, it's a sympathetic chain, and I have been told it's not as tricky as it sounds. But I leave that up to Donald and Elspeth to elaborate on that, because I'm not a vet, so I don't really want to make that judgment. But as I said, it would be great to get those samples. We will be providing detailed post-mortem protocols, and yeah, we have the sample packs. And I've got my email on the next slide, and also information available later on. So please just get in touch with us, and we'll hopefully be able to send the packs out within the next few weeks. And also, just to add on, that we can compensate as well. So we can be invoiced for the postmortem samples. For the ileum sample, it's a flat rate of £125, and for both the ileum and the ganglia sample, it's £175 compensation for travel and time. So just briefly, an overview of the sample packs. So it would be the formalin pots for the post-mortem samples, and blood vials, urine fecal pots, the saliva swab, as I said, is from the Equisal test, and then packaging material, which is all biological substances B compliant. We then have some paperwork as well. So Donald, like I said, will be talking more about the consent and declaration forms. And then we've got the PM protocol, packaging instructions, and then we'll also be including the owner's questionnaire that I talked about on the previous slide. And this questionnaire is also available as a survey online, and then the prepaid postage label. So yeah, please just get in touch with us, email me, and if you're interested in supporting us, and yeah, I can send some sample kits out so you have them at hand if you do happen to have a case. So now just a brief overview of what we sort of, how we think it could work in practice. So obviously the majority of premises practices will not be able to take the samples themselves, or also for logistic reasons, it's probably not possible. But we do have the National Foreign Stock Company on board, and Jane Buckingham and David Lovett are also here tonight. So please, if there are, ask them later on, they are here to answer as well. But generally we think it could work in that way, that either with the involvement of the National Foreign Stock Company, or in some cases, most likely in Scotland, another body will be responsible for the collection. But the diagnosing vet, diagnoses equine grass sickness, and the animal is then euthanized. The collection then happens either via the National Foreign Stock or a different body. The owner or the vet calls the collector, carcass gets picked up and brought to the collection centre, and the vet then takes the sample. So this is also relatively timely, but again, Elspeth will be talking about that in her talk. And then the samples are returned to Malden. And then in a case where, for example, the National Forum stock collection site is too far away or able to take the samples, we do have these standby vets, and it's really great that we have them, and Donald is one of them. And we do have these vets, quite a good team in Scotland, but we still lack those vets in the rest of the country. So especially in Yorkshire and Kent, it would be great if anyone else would like to step up and help us with that. So if one of the diagnosing vets can't actually take a sample, but the animal is then euthanized and the carcass is collected, if Morden is then contacted in time, we can actually arrange for a standby vet like Donald to take those samples. That the vet then gets a picture, just a confirmation of the consent that it's this animal has got consent for. But Donald will be talking more about this. And then the sample is returned to us. So this is generally how we think it could work. And I'd just like to emphasize again at this stage, before passing on to Donald, that the future of equine grass sickness research, as well as obviously our biobank, which should be part of this, is dependent upon these samples. And as I said, we'd like to make it as simple and easy, straightforward as possible for you, in order for you to be able to help us. So yes, any feedback is welcome. So thank you very much.
Hello, right. I'll take over there. I'm assuming because you're watching this that you're already interested in grass sickness or may have a lot of experience of it. So what I would say from our own experience is that the vast majority, and I would think it's 90–95%, certainly at least in our practice, never reach referral. They are put down on the site. So there's a huge amount of diagnostic material which remains in practice, which is really only accessible either by researchers visiting the practice or by vets collecting it in the field. So it's really crucially important that we see lots of vets partaking in this study if we possibly can. It's okay for some institutions which have cases of their own coming in, which can collect some of their own material from acute cases. Other institutes like Morden or other universities, this biobank will be available to other people, may not have access to these samples. This just widens the net. There's already research ongoing, has been in the DIC, and we hope that yields success. This just broadens the whole thing out, and the more people working at it, the more chance we have of making a breakthrough. So I think I've already seen somebody in a surgical gown, so I'm assuming that there are possibly one or two people from surgical referral practices, and they would obviously be extremely useful, but they form a slightly different demographic to the main bulk of people. And I think I would say they could possibly get in touch with Kathy directly. Kathy, they could email you following the link. That would be superb. So I'm going to talk about general practice because that's what I do. My other claim to fame is I live near a knackery, so that's a pretty useful thing in life. So I'm going to pick up what Kathy was saying there. So I'm going to ask Hazel if she could put up the first consent form, which is the owner's consent form, and I'll talk around that.
Bear with me, I'm just trying to get it up for you. Sorry about that.
It is
Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry about this.
I'll speak on how you're working on it, Hazel.
Yeah, sorry about this.
So the owner's consent form has the owner's name and address in it, the animal's microchip and name. Now, this is for the vet and the practice, and it is not to go to more done. So this is like a euthanasia consent form or a medical consent form. It's important that it doesn't actually go to more done. That's the vets one. Have you the other one, Hazel, or I can talk about? Yeah, that's the vet one. Okay. Yep, there, that's it. Okay, perfect, thanks. So top part of this, very standard, name and address, that's okay. The next part in bold, you will see that that says you're giving permission, the owner's giving permission for samples and blood and feces to be sent for research purposes. There's then a separate line which gives permission for the samples of tissue to be collected, and it says delete if applicable. That means there is a choice for the owner, and they can opt out of the tissue collection and only opt for blood and feces sent. So that's first discussion point. There is a little bit of a discussion point, I think, which would occur to most of you, would be the blood sample. What is allowed, because it's a little difficult, that one, I thought personally. We're perfectly allowed to take diagnostic blood, so normal green, purple, red top type vac containers. That's not an issue whatsoever. I think in many cases we would be doing that, probably in most cases. There might be some cases, and the one that gave me a little difficulty, and I'd be interested in people's opinion on this, was that there are some very early cases or slightly milder cases where I used to go and think, I think this might be a grass sickness, but I'm not sure. What am I going to say to the owner? Am I going to tell them at this stage and worry them stupid if it turns out not to be? Very often what I would do in that case would be take the blood samples, say I was going to go away and analyse them, run over a few possibilities, but by the next day I'm pretty sure. I think that's okay. We're taking the diagnostic bloods anyway. Obviously it's not diagnostic, but we're looking for other stuff, ruling out other stuff mainly, really. And I personally always took plenty tubes in case I dropped them or the dog ate them or something like that. So I think it's perfectly okay. It's ethically fine. We've run it past obviously the ethics committee and the Veterinary Defence Society. Everybody seems perfectly happy with that. It's really basically the extra that comes to the to this scheme. We had to rule out one or two bloods which were not normal diagnostic bloods, even though taken at the same time through the same needle, and that wasn't allowed. So these are normal blood samples which you would take. Dung samples, I don't think pose much problem really, because you're rectaling these horses every time. If there is dung in the rectum, sometimes of course there isn't dung in the rectum. You may already be at the dry tachyrectum stage, but if there is dung there, then you're pulling that out anyway. It's in your blood. It's easy. It's not an issue. Ideally, what you do is you discuss with the owner immediately and straight away the possibility of grass sickness, and request that you can do something with the bloods. A little bit of a slightly tricky-ish area there. I think it's perfectly okay, but again, I would be interested in people's opinion on that. I think the thing about this scheme is this is very much a two-way process, and we're very open to doing things differently. The tissue samples, I'm going to come on to that. I'm sure there's one or two people that were pricking up their ears and one or two things worrying them about the tissue sampling. The big issue, I think, is discussing this with the owner and getting permission. And that's going to be sometimes extremely easy. You may have owners who are already on board with the scheme and are actually asking you to do it. running right through to people that you just would think it was completely unsuitable and you would never ask. The animals which go to the fallen stock centres, I think, are possibly slightly easier. The animals which are buried at home, I think many of us would be very hesitant about asking for a post-mortem, except in certain circumstances where we knew the owner extremely well or they were less attached to their animal. So this is very much a case of animal comes first, obviously, owner comes second, and this scheme comes third. Everything else takes precedence, and we're not expecting people to push this beyond what we think is reasonable in this situation. You must make up your own minds as to what's suitable and when to broach the subject. I suspect probably the time that I would probably broach it is at first diagnosis, when there is almost inevitably quite a long conversation about what's the cause, have they done anything wrong, all that sort of thing. At that point, you can bring in the difficulties of it, the difficulties of research, why the research is still ongoing. It's not anybody's fault. It might be useful at this stage to do a bit of name dropping unashamedly. Princess Anne was on the little podcast for the Morden, and the Queen lost 2 horses at Balmoral, and they're featuring on the owners webinar we're doing in a couple of days. So if you want to say, look, it happens to everybody, and you want to name drop them, do so unashamedly. We have the royal assent, as it were, in fact, encouragement. So let's assume that you've got to that point, and you're discussing the collection. These little bullet points here are important, and particularly the first one. So the first one says, I understand that post-mortem sample collection is not diagnostic and that no diagnosis can be reported. Now, if you are one of the people who can follow Kathy's first line of flow, where basically you can do your own post-mortems, wherever it is on your own premises, fallen stock centres, then that's absolutely fine. You can obviously report your own post-mortems should you wish to do so. If you want a post-mortem and you're not going to do it yourself, you must arrange that separately, not through this scheme. It will just not be possible to do it through this scheme. This is a tissue collection only. Running down through the other ones, these are all relatively straightforward, although I would point out that it does say that samples will be retained for 20 years, and that in the effect of grass sickness cause being found, the samples may be used for other research purposes. Now, that gives us 20 years to get the answer. I'm very hopeful that one of these groups will all find the answer, so that does come into play. I don't think that's an issue. I think by the time people have given their assent for any tissue collection, they'll probably be quite happy for it to be used for other purposes. So remember, this form does not go anywhere other than your practice records. The Veterinary Defence Society have been extremely helpful, and they did point out that this sort of permission can be verbal. As long as you write it in the clinical notes, that's perfectly acceptable. It would then be a matter of practice policy or your own personal decision whether you use this or not. I think it's probably quite a good idea, and I think it's a particularly good idea if you can't do post-mortem yourself or within practice. So if we could move on to the veterinary declaration form, please, Hazel. Okay, that's fine. So now a question I'm sure that would occur to a lot of people is, who the hell is going to be post-morteming my case, and is it my neighbour down the road? Let's face it, that's how life is out there. So there are lots of safeguards in here. So this is essentially the same form in the middle, but without the owner's name and address, and with the signature of the vet rather than the owner at the bottom. If we take the case of somebody who can post-mortem their own animal, then this accompanies all the samples to the mortem. Obviously, in cases where the vet can't take the samples themselves, at that point they phone the central number, which is already, I think, on the website, will be very shortly, and then it's up to the central number to find a reserve vet. Now, the reserve vet, it can be anybody. It can be a retired older person like me, or we're hoping it's going to be lots of local practices. We're hoping they're going to get involved. So the main thing is that once you have phoned Borden and told them where the animal is going to be, fallen stock will obviously come into this as well. Then it is, if you like, out of your hands. So your form will go to the Borden, but obviously the post-mortem may need to be done before they get that form. So the standby vet will only get the microchip ID and the colour of the horse, just enough to identify the body. So they will not get sight of this form. So they will not know who the owner is, they won't know who you are, they won't even know what part of the country you come from. If this happened in our area, the animal could come from anywhere between John O'Groats and perhaps Dundee at the bottom end, literally anywhere within that area. So as the standby vet, then it becomes very important that obviously you are discreet. You should know nothing other than the microchip number and the colour. It's not up to you to make any attempt at diagnosis. You just go and collect the relevant bits. By this time, again, we will, the first vet should have informed the owner that these are not diagnostic samples. I think this is crucially important because we do not want to get involved in insurance disputes, clinical arguments. It's absolutely anonymous, and I'm afraid not even material information, can be sent back to the referring vet, however much they might want to know if they were correct. Unfortunately, a bit of a lost opportunity for learning there, but that's the way it's got to be. So I think we covered the legal and ethical basis for these pretty well with all the help from VBS. Very good, as I say. Ethics were pretty tight, obviously. This is where you all come in. So as Kathy said, this has been a little bit rushed. She has had very little time to do this, and we know that this is a little bit rough around the edges. So what we need is feedback and suggestions straight away. Feedback if you start using the system in an attempt to streamline it, improve it, and iron out any problems. So you will be getting a feedback form fairly quickly after this, which are all sorts of information that we need to know. We'd love to know what you think of the incidents. We'd love to know where you are, if you're a new graduate, about to graduate, or old. And essentially, we really need you to get involved in all sorts of ways. We need extra samplers for people who can't do it. We need people to spread the word, which is very important, because obviously there's a limited audience we can reach. So this is really, it's not so much a feedback survey as a recruitment drive for anybody that's interested to please join in, give us your opinions. There will be, I hope, loads of feedback. I was delighted to hear Kathy and definitely saying that they were a collaborative project with us all. So please get involved. We really need you. Thanks very much.
Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Yep.
It looks fine, Elspeth. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Great. So what I'm going to cover in my talk is the practicalities of collecting the post-mortem samples. We've tried to keep it as simple as we can, as it can be really. So the samples that we're interested in receiving are the sympathetic chain, or sometimes known as the thoracic chain of ganglia. A piece of terminal ileum is the other thing, because we know that these are tissues that where there are particularly significant changes in grass sickness. Good question is how long, which I'm quite often asked, how long after death are the samples still going to be suitable? So I would say probably in the region of about 18 hours. Once you get up to about 24 hours, then things are starting to get quite autolyzed and not very useful. So that's kind of your cutoff point, but obviously it's going to depend on what the ambient temperature is and where the animal's being kept after death. And as Donald mentioned already, just to re-emphasize that this is not a diagnostic service, these samples are for the biobank for research purposes. Okay, you were promised some gory pictures, but I've tried to kind of minimize these as far as possible. So in terms of the practicalities of collecting these two sets of samples that I mentioned, first of all, I'm going to assume that the horse has been taken to a fallen stock company or a knackery or similar kind of premises where you can completely open up the carcass. This can be done either by placing the animal in lateral recumbency, and it can be either on the right or left side, it doesn't matter, or you can do it with the horse hanging vertically, and again it can be either suspended from the hind legs or suspended from the forelegs. It doesn't really matter from the point of view of collecting the samples. So I tend to find it easier to do it on the floor. So what we've done here is to flap back the upper leg, in this case the left leg, foreleg, has been just cut back and pushed out of the way. And then we've taken off the whole left side of the rib cage here. Can you see my mouse arrow okay? Can you see that moving? Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, perfect. So the thoracic chain or sympathetic chain is just, I'll show you a closer up view just in a second, but it just lies along the vertebral bodies here in the thorax, just where the ribs attach onto the vertebral bodies. And it's actually, it's pretty easy to find once you've opened up the carcass like this. So just looking at the same view, but a little bit closer in, you can see this now as a pale line just running down here. At least I hope you can see it. There's just that, so that's a sympathetic chain there. And between each vertebral body, so here's the vertebral bodies here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Between each vertebral body, there is a very small ganglion which is embedded within that sympathetic nerve running down here. And what I would suggest that you do is to take out about 20 to 30 centimeters length of that nerve And the easiest thing to do is just to, if the lungs are in the way, just pull them down a little bit out of the way, as we've done here, and just take a scalpel blade and just run it down the side, just at the edge of the nerve, at the top, and then the same thing again, just below it. And then you can just cut it at each end and then just peel it off. It'll come off quite easily. So it may come off with quite a bit of fat and connective tissue as well. So just trim that off. And you could actually just gently scrape the underside with the scalpel blade just to get rid of any fat, because you don't want to have anything really in the pot other than the nerve itself with these little ganglia attached, and a minimum amount of anything else that's attached to it. So it's really not too bad once you've got the thorax opened up to find that sympathetic nerve. This is just a diagram of it. There's one goes down each side. You just need to take one piece out, and it's just the little paravertebral ganglia between each vertebral body and the interganglionic connections that form the sympathetic nerve. You don't have to dissect out individual ganglia or anything like that. Just send in the whole piece that you've collected. Oops, sorry. So the next thing is the terminal ilium, and it's dead easy when you can spread the whole thing out like this in a nice post-mortem room floor. But this is the bit that we're interested in here, just as the ilium goes into the base of the cecum, as we've got here, shown here. So it's just this very terminal bit just before the ileocecal orifice that we're interested in. And that's, as you probably know, that's where the worst changes occur in the enteric neurons in grass sickness. Probably more likely you're going to be in this kind of situation where you're pulling out the material from the abdomen, the tissues from the abdomen, and this will be what it'll look like. So you've got the terminal ilium coming down here into the base of the cecum, just there. So just cut out, and I would suggest you take out about 15 centimetres of the terminal ilium. Now you're not going to send in 15 centimetres length of it. It just means that when you come, as I'll show you in a second, to take out a little piece of that, you won't have to actually handle the piece that you're going to send in and potentially cause damage to it. So it gives you a bit of a leeway for actually handling it without touching the bit you're going to send in. So usually you're going to be in this, or at least I hope anyway, you're going to be in a situation where you are able to open up the entire cadaver like this. But if you do find yourself on the owner's premises and the owner has given permission for a sample to be collected, it would be pretty unlikely that you'd be able to do it this way, of course. That wouldn't be, well, it wouldn't really be desirable in any sort of sense of the word. So if you are in that situation and you have to do something like a cosmetic type post-mortem, then you're not really going to be able to collect the sympathetic chain. That would be pretty unlikely that you'll manage to do that. But you may be able to find the terminal ilium. So what you can do there is to just make a ventral abdominal incision in the midline, just in front of the pelvis, perhaps about 20 centimetres long, something like that, and big enough to get your hand into the abdomen. And if you feel dorsally and towards the right side, the horse's right side, up to the sort of top right quadrant, if you like, you may be able to feel the ilium as it's going into the base of the cecum, and it often feels quite thick and rubbery, almost like feeling a hose. And if you do manage to feel that, you can just pull it towards yourself then, out of the abdominal incision, and just take your 15 centimetres, or at least as much as you can get, and then you've got a sample, and then you can just suture up the abdomen. It is a little bit easier said than done, to be perfectly fair, but it is possible to do that. So once you've got your 15 centimetres roughly of terminal ilium,
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy, Donna, and Elsa. It was really interesting, informative presentation. So for the question and answer session, so Lee, is there a little? Is it? I'm getting a double echo.
Sorry, yeah, I can hear it. But
I'll try.
I think we all need to switch our mics off if we're not speaking. That's maybe giving you the echo, Anne.
Right, okay. So just to run through for the question and answer session, as well as our speakers, we have, as already mentioned, Jane Rockingham and David Lovett from the National Fallen Stock Company, who can help with any queries relevant to them. If we do not have time for all questions this evening, there will be an opportunity to send any unanswered queries into the Equine Grass Sickness Fund office by email. Most importantly, we would also like you to complete a post-event survey, which will include an invitation to join the Equine Grass Sickness Practitioner group and that's probably the most important form that you'll fill in regarding this project. The evaluation document will also include all the downloads to the information sheets, the consent forms and the protocols, but these will also be available to the on the equine grass sickness website. So by joining the group, though, we can keep you updated with research and biobank progress and provide a forum for future two-way discussion. So can I just, when asking a question, can I just ask you to state where you're from in the country and to whom the question is directed? And as I say, if you can use your hands up icon, they should come up in a chronological order and I will try and call you forward as such. Thanks. So anyone with any questions? I hope we've not scared everyone off. Yeah, James Risk, thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Elspeth, are they the best or only ganglia that we could get, or do we have any other options?
Yes, there are other options. These are the sympathetic chain is by far the easiest to find. There's another couple that you could possibly go for. One is the cranial cervical ganglion that are just, you would have to disarticulate the head at the atlanto-occipital joint, leaving the caudal aspect of the guttural pouches intact, and the cranial cervical ganglia are within the wall of the guttural pouch, or just caudal to the wall of the guttural pouch, but actually attached to it. And they're kind of, I can, if you wanted, you could email me. I can send you some pictures of them.
No, I think that one sounds quite. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they're kind of a little elliptical things, about an inch long, something like that. The other one that you can get is the celiaco-mesenteric ganglion. So the way to do that is if you follow down the sympathetic chain that I was describing in the talk, and just keep going down towards the abdomen. And if you blunt dissect through the diaphragm, so you're just in front of the kidney, it's actually attached to the end of that sympathetic chain. And it kind of broadens out into a Y shape, quite a thick Y-shaped structure, which is the the celiaco-mesenteric ganglion.
Thanks. I was just chatting to Alexander Gray at RPM just to work out what, and I think that's the sample he often gets. So I was just checking that if that was the one I ended up getting, that would be some good.
Yes, and if you get that, totally fine to send that in.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions? Can I just ask, Elspeth, you make it sound terribly easy to get these samples. I'm just, but I'm sure, Donald, I know you've taken samples, haven't you? The ganglia.
Yeah, I've taken the celiaco-mesenteric ganglia before. It's a bit fiddly and you need good light, but you know that's on the floor in the knackery. So yeah, it's definitely possible. I think one thing to say about the samples is that they've been deliberately kept simple at this stage. We didn't want to put folk off by asking them to get celiaco-mesenteric ganglia. But there is no limit. The sky is the limit. If you've got the basics, then feel free, go for it. In fact, it'd be great if you would. The other thing perhaps to say is that I think that's possibly, this is the samples at the moment, but speaking to Kathy, they may develop into other things. So this is not the be all and the end all. Just keep an eye on the website. Things may change over the years.
Good. A question from Morven, I think Morven W.
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about how to visualize that sympathetic chain and how you actually reflect the ribs to be able to see them. And I also wondered, is this a structure that we'd be able to observe if we were, say, post-morteming a sheep for another reason? Would we be able to, you know, if we would be able to see that just, you know, as a means of practice, really?
In a sheep, did you say?
Yeah, I'm just thinking we've post-mortem
Yeah.
a lot of sheep, so and I won't get the opportunity to post-mortem a lot of horses. So
Yeah.
it's a structure that I would be able to identify doing that, you know.
That is actually quite a good question, and I've never tried to collect one from sheep, but as far as I know, they should also have a sympathetic chain going. Well, they do have a sympathetic chain, but I think it would be in a similar position. But to be honest, once you've, well, just to go to your first question, actually, was how to take the ribs off. We just use, in our post-mortem room at the DIC, we just use loppers, you know, that you would buy in a garden centre. And you can just chop off the bottom of the, initially the top of the ribs, and then the bottom where just going through the sternum.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just lift off the whole side.
Right, just make like a kind of window rather than trying to bend them back the way.
Yes, I would do. Yeah,
right.
Just take it completely off and make it easy for yourself so that you've got plenty of access. And then once you've done that, if you can't see the sympathetic chain, it may be because the lungs are still inflated to an extent and they're just covering it. So just pull the lungs downwards a little bit and you'll definitely see it there. Even if the horse is really fat, it's usually on the outside of the fat and not too much embedded within it. So, you know, once you've got the thing opened up properly, I don't think you will find it that difficult to see the sympathetic chain.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not just being over optimistic, honestly.
No worries, thanks.
I think Elspeth also, is it not often the case, once you're in the knackery, certainly Donald, your friendly knacker man would probably do all the donkey work for you, wouldn't he, and open it up.
Yeah.
And then you can just go and take the actual, the bits. Well, that was my experience with cattle in the good old days anyway, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my
definitely.
experience. Yeah, very helpful.
Yeah. Always used to be worth a bottle of whiskey or two at Christmas time, but maybe change days. Do we have any more questions? I think we scared you all into silence. Bridget, yes, thank you.
Hi there, Bridget Taylor from Cheshire. I know the level of grass sickness that our equine teams are seeing in sort of Cheshire areas is really reduced drastically in the last 10 years. But I'm just wondering, of the English-based vets on the call, what sort of levels of cases they're seeing, and you know, if you've got any feel for where we're seeing cases. There's been on the Facebook site. There's been a few, you know, Facebook pages. There's been quite a few people mentioning it recently, and a horse that was sadly had to be euthanized at Liverpool Vet School recently. But just, you know, have we got any feedback from the rest of the country at the moment?
I think, Bridget, my impression, as I'm just a part-time vet now, but certainly in the last 5 years in kind of East Central Scotland, we have seen fewer cases. I don't know if that's the same. There's always hot spots, but certainly in general terms, we've definitely seen fewer cases in the last 5 years. Donald, how about you?
Yeah, I would say definitely, and possibly declining slowly before that. It's always difficult because when you get a bad year, or you get somebody who has 5 and then, you know, next year you just have 3 ones or something. Yeah, it's really difficult. But yes, over the course of many years now, it's just, I think, slowly declined. And when you now compare it to the horse population, which is in the area, then it is certainly declined. The horse population must have gone up in the area by a factor of 4 in 25, 30 years. And yet I think our grass sicknesses are slightly less. So that represents, I think, quite a fall. But that's something I think we're keen to know. And I think that's going to be on the feedback form. Is Kathy still there?
Yes, yeah, no. So that's also in the feedback survey, or just information survey really, or comments as well. But I did pop a few questions on there, including just generally the number of cases that vets see. So it'd be good if you guys could complete that.
Thanks.
I just noticed David. I think David and Jane are relatively local to where we are. David Lockett and Jane Rockingham, Fallen Stock. We've worked with you guys on a farm animal project before in this area. I just wondered what your, as Fallen Stock people for collecting horses in the kind of Midlands of England, what your experiences are.
As you know, Bridget, nothing's really changed with the Nackerman. They're still there to provide post-mortem facility. You know, they're very helpful when vets go to site. We're further than we've ever travelled for fallen stock. So there's no real issues as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, you know as well as I do that the Nackermen in our area are very good.
Mm. No, I was wondering if you'd any perception of people coming to look at horses that might have died of grass sickness, that might have been euthanized with it. You know, if you've come across many in the area.
No, to be honest, very rare. To be honest, to have a horse postmortems. I've not actually had grass sickness mentioned. No.
Right. Thanks.
Lee, sorry, did you?
Yeah, no, I was really just going to say that we're obviously, as Donald and Elspeth and Kathy have said, part of our research is we're very interested to find out how many cases are out there. And even for us as part of the database is to get a baseline. And if they are reducing over the time of the project, we'd be very interested in that, because obviously we're trying to find out what causes it. And if the numbers are going down, that's quite interesting. And could we relate that to something that might be causing it? Obviously, differences in climate, differences in areas in the UK. So all of that is really good data for us. So if even as Kathy's saying, if you could give us your impressions just now, what we'll also do is we're having another webinar with horse owners, and we're going to just try and gather some of this data over the course of the project to really get some numbers on this. So it will be part of our database. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Lee. Do we have any more questions from the floor? No, I think. James, yes. James Risk.
Sorry, Anne, last moment. It was just one other final thing was, we don't have it, but I know Edinburgh have got a very nice post-mortem lab camera. And if anyone was really interested, I was just wondering whether Elspeth and Craig could do some sort of demo. I don't know whether that's at all possible, or whether, I mean, we'd probably need to collect people's RCVS numbers. But I don't know. It's quite difficult for anyone who's not seen it, and I've got the advantage of a PM lab to go and practice.
Yeah, that's a good point, James. We actually have planned to do a video on the next case that we get in on how to collect these samples. So I think we haven't quite worked out how we're going to do it, but in some way we'll make this available to people.
Thanks, Elspeth. Richard, did I see Richard with your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Anne. I just wanted to point out, going back to your previous point about numbers, we are still however we can, collecting numbers of grass sickness cases and reporting them in the DEFRA quarterly disease surveillance report. We've got a full archive of those now hosted on an International Collating Centre website that we're hosting. Obviously, we lost the Animal Health Trust, but we're keeping this initiative going. The surveillance of grass sickness, I think, is not as good as we would like it to be, but we are, with your help at the fund, collating information on a quarterly basis. And there you can see the numbers and some case details where we have them. I think our impression, definitely following the initiation of the vaccine trial, was that the numbers definitely went down, and it sounds like that's maintaining, which is obviously good for the horses, but not so good for the research. So I do wish you all the very best with this initiative. I'll post up the link to the Collating Centre website, and if you go on the tab that's marked Archive and Resources, or Resources and Archive, you'll have a full list of the DEFRA reports on there, and people can go through those as they wish. Thank you.
Thank you, that's great. Lee, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just to say thanks very much, Richard. It would be really good to have these, and Kathy was very keen to start collating as much as we could around that to sort of advise on the epidemiology. We're obviously very sad about the Animal Health Trust, and what we'd really like to do with this project is bringing all the intelligence we can and all the information we can to bring to the project. So thank you very much for that.
Good. Thank you, Richard. Do you want to say anything else, Richard?
No, that's it. Thank you for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, I think if that's no more questions, I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, for attending and for your interest and input tonight. It is a very exciting time for the fund, and as we progress this joint research project with Morden, especially with the development of the biobank, and its success will be mainly in your hands. Your support will be invaluable, and without it, we will not succeed. So thank you again to our speakers, Lee, Kathy, Donald and Elspeth, and to Jane and David for joining us from the Fallen Stock Company. Lastly, a huge thanks to our administrator, Kate, for organising the webinar. Kate will be your point of contact with the Equine Grass Sickness Fund, and her contact details should be on the meeting chat and also on our website. I'd just like to reiterate again that we would really like you to come on board as ambassadors, because I say without you, this project will not succeed. The cause of equine grass sickness has evaded us for the last 100 years. So let's hope by all working together now we can, in this decade, at least come up with some answers. So thank you all again, and stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.